Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 7 and be with me in the book of 1 Peter. We're going to finish chapter 1 today, and I'm going to title today, For the Sake of You. So this is going to be all about you. So if you ask the question, how does this affect me? This is the podcast for you. So whether you're a believer, this is for you, or a non-believer, this is for you. Welcome. Glad you're here. Read with me from 1 Peter chapter 1, the last 2 paragraphs or so. I'm going to start. It's a whole emphasis on who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And he's going to conclude and said, this is the good news. So if you want to know what the good news is, listen in. All right. Verse 18, knowing that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you. It's my big theme for the day, for the sake of you. Who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. Having purified your souls by obedience to the truth for a sincere brotherly love. Love one another earnestly from a pure heart, since you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and abiding word of God. For all flesh is like grass, and all its glory is like the flower of the grass. The grass withers and the flower fails, but the word of the Lord remains forever. And this word is the good news that was preached to you. So he concludes and says, this is the good news. And he's asking us today to consider a bunch of things. So we're going to consider a bunch of P's here. We're going to consider the permanence of what he's done. We're going to consider the power of what he's done. We're going to consider his presence. We're going to consider his purpose. And then we're going to consider some stuff about ourselves. We're going to consider our placement. And we're going to consider our purification. And we're going to consider the period, the time period. All right, let's start with this. First of all, first thing we're supposed to do is consider the permanence of the things that are being exchanged here. And he's going to use something that are precious in our world, silver and gold, and he's going to call them perishable. It's like, well, okay, so even the things that are most permanent here, he's saying they're worthless in the economy that we're going to talk about. And he says, consider the permanence of the preciousness of the blood of Christ. So, blood is obviously something that's supposed to stay inside. And when blood comes out, it's kind of a big deal. And with Jesus, it's voluntary and it's effective. And by his wounds, we are going to be healed. It's going to do something. So that's the second point, is let's consider the power. So by his wounds, by his bleeding, you were blank. And so let's say I bled, for you, or, fell off my bike or something. The bleeding that I would have has no effect. It's just bleeding. But his bleeding, his sacrifice causes a ransoming, a healing, a saving. So the question we're asking is, we have to consider the power. That's point number 2. And is the blood effective? The short answer is yes. All right, the third point is consider his presence. And, the amazing thing about this story, about the good news, is that he showed up in the first place. So he's been around before the foundation of the world and then makes manifest here. Verse 20, he comes here. So he shows up. He's present. And the fourth point is, well, what's the purpose? Why? Why does he bother? Well, verse 20, for the sake of you. So don't we all want to have, the world revolve around us? And here in the gospel, it does. It's made manifest for each of us. So it's, sort of hard to get your head around the laser beam of love that shines right on top of your head. He's saying, I did this for you. I showed up. I came with effect. I came with precious blood. I came for you. So he leaves some stuff on the table, and we're supposed to consider our attachment to him. We have a choice to be a believer in God or not a believer in God. We have that choice today and what we put our faith in, and what we put our faith in for the future. That's called hope. So whose team are you on is my short answer to this, my little snarky thing about consider your placement. At the end of this day, at the end of this podcast, at the end of these 7 minutes, do you want to be on God's team or not on God's team? We all get a choice. And then verse 22, consider your purification, or the practical walking out of this. He's going to describe it as obedience and love. So are you walking with him? So this is how the people of God have the good news preached to them over and over. So consider, then he says, all flesh is like grass. So consider your time period. He's saying here at the end of 1 Peter chapter 1, we don't have much time. And, where are you going to be at the end of today? And when are you going to be, whatever your purification issue is? How about your purity, or your kindness, or your security in him, or your steadfastness in him? You don't have yesterday and you don't have tomorrow. All you have is today. So today is a summary of the good news. He says this. This is the good news. Why is there good news? Well, it's a dream of every person. It's for you. It's for the sake of you. So how does this affect me? If you're a non-believer today, consider your placement. Consider the team that you're on. If you're a believer today, then consider your purification, your walk with him, your applying all these things. He came with permanence, with not with something perishable, with something precious. He came with power. His blood was effective. He came, his presence. And then he came for us. So this is the summary of the good news. Consider whether you agree with it. These are things that he did for you. Whose team are you going to be on today? At the end of today, all we have is today. You don't have much time. Let's make a decision for him. Thanks for listening. Walk with him today.